Ladies and gentlemen, K-Kim here. Welcome to the market update. Today, market is up pretty much flat on the S&P. You can see that 0.02%. However, on the NASDAQ is up about 0.8%. And we got the small caps, Russell 2000 is down about 0.5%. It's you can say kind of a pause day, but actually a lot has happened. If you just looked at the numbers, you thought today was not a huge deal, not a big activities or action in the market. But if we actually kind of dive in here, which we're going to do right now, a lot of things actually have happened. So we're going to talk about it right now. You can see on the S&P, this is 65-minute chart. You can see that we actually gapped down. So this was this morning here. And we've been talking about this gap area, right? So we've been talking about this support area. So 289, we drew that line a couple weeks ago here, and you can see this is actually where it closed on Friday. We gapped down, initially pulled back exactly where it was, where we found support back in May 8th in the morning when we saw that gap up. You see that gap up, and then pull back, got back up, and we rallied. Exact same spot there, 289.88. And something noticeable happened today, and that is actually, if you actually look at this, I think what's important is there was, looking at this 65-minute, that was a pretty decent, it's not like big gap or anything like that, but pretty decent sized gap. That was a pretty decent sized gap down. Remember, that's where it closed on Friday. That's where it opened. So let's see, that was what? That's 0.7% pullback or gap down. That's a pretty decent sized gap. And then at one point, we continued lower to 289.88. Buyers stepped in. And I told you that this would happen, that unless we see some big gap down, there are too many supports, right? We've been talking about that pretty much entire last week. Even on Friday's video that I've mentioned that any kind of little pullbacks or any kind of little small gap downs, it's going to be met with, buyers stepping in, buying that dip because there are too many support. Also because buyers have built that momentum for the last, several weeks already. So that's kind of what happened here. But here's something that it got my attention is that there was this gap down, right? And many times when the gap gets filled, it usually, in a normal circumstances, it usually acts as what? Resistance, right? We talked about that on Friday. So when the gap gets filled, it acts as resistance. I wasn't watching it this morning or this afternoon, but I thought that when the gap got filled, we're gonna close maybe below it, something like that. The gap gets filled. We hang around in that vicinity at 292 where the gap area is. Maybe poke his head up like that with the little long, the upper tail. I was thinking maybe something like that. I was actually kind of surprised to see we thrived above it without any kind of hesitation, right? So you can see on this hour, this is about 2 hours into it in the market, 1, 2, right? And the third hour, you can see how you get first hour, second hour, third hour, right? You can see how we kind of, we thrived above it, and then we didn't pull back. This gap area never really did act as resistance. And that was not only that was a gap area, it was the swing high resistance, right? That was the resistance. So we never really saw any kind of resistance. We continued higher, and we're pulling back towards the last hour, but we're still at that prior resistance and potentially new support, right? So you can see that we're right back at this support. Looking at things a short term, this is much more constructive for the buyers versus because what happened was we already cultivated, again, yet another, in the short term, higher high. It would have been better if the bears stepped in here, made it into a double top, right? and then made it some kind of a shooting star candle or something like that, or at least pull back a little bit, then you can see at that point you can say, okay, we got equal highs, maybe trend is slowing down, potentially double top. By going up and cultivating higher high, you're continuing to support bullish agenda here with higher highs and higher lows. We do have, bearish side, we do have three hour candles of evening star reversal. It wasn't fruitful last time. You can see that we saw something similar last time here. That's that evening star reversal, right? Bullish candle, and then we got that doji, and then next hour bearish candle. So we can see that we saw follow through, but it wasn't successful, and then that thing just continued higher next day. So we do have that potentially evening star reversal pattern, 3-hour pattern, but it's you know what I mean, because we're in the short term bullish sentiment, as we just talked about, we wouldn't know until we see some follow to the downside. You know what I mean? The best bet will be bears need to bring it down back to 289, and then maybe do some kind of a head and shoulder formation in the short term. Until then, we want to give benefit of the doubt to the buyers in the short term of things. So let's zoom out a little bit. Let's look at a longer term picture now. So when we zoom out here, you can see that in the longer term of picture, we are kind of stalling. Last hour we are kind of, seeing some resistance in that vicinity, right? That's that prior high there, 429, and that's a prominent resistance. I mean, everybody can see that we were there in late April. So for 292, 293 area, kind of a prominent resistance. I'm not surprised to see a little bit of slowdown there and anticipation of what's going to happen. So if the bears do bring it down to 289, 289-ish, bulls want to protect these two levels. We have that short-term moving average there rising. And I'll give you another level. So we got 289, 287 as a support. You can see that the longer-term moving average is hanging around in that 287 level. Remember that active support here. We were near that level here and here. So far, that longer-term moving average, has been acting as strong support. It does have impressive resonance, and we cannot ignore that. And both of those moving averages are rising. When you see those are rising, we got to continue to give benefit of doubt to the buyers in the short term, mid term, long term. Looking at the 65-minute chart, I'm not talking about the major primary term. I'm talking about just in a context of just this trend here, right? Short term, we want to give benefit of doubt. Mid term, we want to give benefit of doubt. Longer term, we want to give benefit of the doubt to the buyers at this point, even though we are stalling a little bit at this resistance, right? Even though, because remember, we saw something similar here. We kind of stalled a little bit, and we've been seeing, that kind of things happening, like here, even here. You can see that here, we stalled a little bit, right? There was that equal high, and then just, market just gapped up, And so even here, not there, but here, right? So right now, only thing that bears need to go off of is the argument of that we're at the prior resistance. That's pretty much at this point. That's only thing that bears have is that we're at the resistance. Right now, bulls have built so much momentum that that's only thing they have. Again, unless shenanigan, like bearish shenanigan, some huge gap down, which we talked about on the last weekend's video, right? Let's look at the oscillator real quick here. Oscillators are signaling that we are back at the overbought sentiment, right? So you can see those couple times here. We're back at it. Keep in mind, just because we're back at that level does not mean the market has to pull back. You remember back in April 28th here, that we hit that overbought level. Next day, market gapped up. Market did gap up. Sooner or later, we did come back down to retest the oversold level. As of now, we don't know when that's going to happen. Sometimes it could take whole month. You can see here back in April 7th for, I don't know, I think it was, for about 2 weeks after it got into overbought sentiment, it continued to grind higher for the next, okay, that was what, April 7th, April 21st. So for 2 weeks, it continued grind higher until we got to the oversold level, which is the bottom of its band. So we are at the overbought level. That does not mean it's going to come back down to retest the oversold level. According to this oscillator, looking at this oscillator, we could very well grind here. So I guess just to recap everything before I close this video, bears, we got that resistance, prior resistance, right? And then we are at the overbought sentiment. That's what bears have at this point. For buyers, lots of momentum. We got all these moving averages rising. We have a lot of momentum built here. We got longer term higher lows still in play, and we got these supports. That's going to be a pretty strong support because they're also coincided with the gaps. So any kind of small pullbacks or any kind of small gap downs will probably met with buying activities on that day. So bears really need to bring it down. But as of today, as of now, I want to continue to give benefit of doubt to the buyers. So you guys have a wonderful evening and good luck trading tomorrow.